The Stone Zone, with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Hello and welcome to the Stone Zone. I am not Roger Stone. I am Mark Vargas, editor-in-chief of Illinois Review. Roger will be joining us in a few moments, but don't go away because we have an incredible show for you this evening. But before we begin, let's talk about one of our favorite targets, and that's the city of Chicago and the embattled mayor, Brandon Johnson. This weekend, before a CNN host on a podcast, Mayor Johnson gave an interview where he referred to the evilness of President Trump's policies. In fact, he says, and I quote, "Trump has demonstrated an incredible disdain for people, disdain towards not just immigrants, but lovers of public education." Let's pause there for a second. Lovers of public education. It was under Brandon Johnson's administration that earlier in August, not that long ago, on just 2 days before the start of the new school year, nearly 2,000 families with children with disabilities received an email from the Chicago Public School System saying, "I'm sorry, we cannot pick up your child for school on Monday morning because we don't have enough bus drivers," with absolutely no recourse, no plan B. And so what that left was, during the first week of school, parents scrambling to figure out childcare, who's going to take care of their children, how are they going to get caught up missing so much school. But again, Brandon Johnson says he's a lover of education, but nearly 2,000 children with disabilities didn't go to school on the first day because of a bus driver shortage. Talk about leadership. But that's not all. Brandon Johnson said, "It is my responsibility and it is my joy to protect all residents of this beloved city." Well, let's talk about that. You'll remember Brandon Johnson is the mayor that actually blamed President Richard Nixon. Again, blamed President Richard Nixon for the current crime wave facing Chicago. Let's take a watch.
So we cut off the pipeline of boys between the ages of 10 and 19 being either victims or the perpetrators. So, yeah, it is personal. Black death has been unfortunately accepted in this country for a very long time. We had a chance 60 years ago to get at the root causes, and people mocked President Johnson, and we ended up with Richard Nixon. I'm going to work hard every day to transform this city. That's what it takes to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago, and I need everybody to step up.
Blaming Richard Nixon for the crime wave facing Chicago? You've got to be kidding me. Now, in an Illinois Review article just a few weeks ago, we published an article that says that Brandon Johnson's approval ratings are at 15%, while one of his top aides, his communications director, faced racism, misogyny, and a variety of sexual harassment complaints. And when all of this came to light, Mayor Johnson played completely stupid. "Oh, I didn't know that this was happening," when multiple complaints have been filed within his office by various women since the beginning of his administration. But Brandon's poll numbers at 14% are so bad that the Chicago City Council, all Democrats, have been emboldened to reject his fiscal year 2025 budget, not once, not twice, but 3 different times. It may go to a 4th. Time will tell. They have until December 31st to agree on a budget. But what's the reasoning behind this? City council members of his own party are basically saying this mayor is so badly damaged, his poll numbers are so low that we'll actually get a bump as aldermen and alderwomen. We'll actually get a bump within our own constituency for voting down any of his proposals. Now, Chicago is in a gigantic, they're facing a gigantic deficit. But that didn't stop the city of Chicago and Mayor Brandon Johnson. And I've got to look at these numbers because they're remarkable. Brandon Johnson has put $450 million to house, to feed, and to provide health care for migrants while his own residents are starving and dying on the streets, while his own residents with disabilities can't even go to school on the first day because of a bus driver shortage. In addition to that, think about this. In Mayor Johnson's budget, as crime continues to skyrocket, Chicago leads in murders and mass shootings, and they lead in youth shootings. Over 100 youth under the age of 17 have been shot in Chicago since the beginning of the year. While he's doing that, what does he want to do? He wants to eliminate vacant police officer positions, vacant police officer shootings. Now, again, in 2023, over 220,000 high priority 911 calls went unanswered in Chicago. Why? Because of a police officer shortage. Over 2,000 officers, the police department is over 2,000 officers short. And that is why they don't have enough vehicles, they don't have enough manpower, and they're only responding to high priority 911 calls. And more importantly, the city of Chicago is only making the police officers' hands are literally handcuffed behind their backs. They're only doing roughly 5% of arrests of violent felonies. 5%. Carjackings are through the roof. Violence on the CTA platforms, public transportation. Who do you think's taking these trains back and forth throughout the city? It's the poor. It's the people who can't afford vehicles. It's the residents in the south and west sides of Chicago, predominantly the black and brown communities, that their only way of transportation to and from work, to and from school, is to take the train. But under Mayor Johnson's administration, crime on trains has skyrocketed. And again, he talks about my responsibility to the city of Chicago and to the residents is to protect. But that's not all. Imagine trying to fix your budget deficit by eliminating police positions. It's shocking, and it is why Brandon Johnson's poll numbers are only at 14%. Let's not forget that while he's blaming Richard Nixon for the rise in crime in Chicago, while he's patting the pockets of the migrants who are here to make sure that they've got new shoes and Android and Apple cell phones and places to live, it is under Brandon Johnson's administration that single women, victims of domestic abuse, who are mothers, are being pushed out of line for homes. Veterans who served our country honorably are being pushed out of line for homes. Homeless veterans, homeless single moms, for who? Brandon Johnson says we need to make room for the migrants. That's right. The migrants have taken over the last 4 years, have taken precedent over their own residents, over their own citizens, over their own people. And as a result, Brandon Johnson's numbers are not only bad, but it's also been reported that Brandon Johnson has gone to the hospital over a dozen times. For what? For panic attacks. That's right, for panic attacks. But yet Brandon Johnson still has time while he still can't figure out a budget, while city council is slamming and shutting the door on his budget proposals, whereas all of the hard-earned taxpayer dollars were going to line the pockets of the migrants. He's also, and while local Chicago residents are having to tighten their belts and figure out what they need to spend on for priorities, whether groceries or medication, Brandon Johnson's saying, we're going to give you now a $300 million property tax increase. Think about that. While people are hurting, while his own residents are struggling, what's his answer to solve problems? Not just to reduce the number of police officer positions within the Chicago Police Department. It's more than that. It's we're going to force you to try and spend more money because of property tax increases. But City Council rejected that not once, but twice, and they rejected it in a historic way, 50-0. A Chicago mayor's proposal, his budget, has never been shot down unanimously by City Council, 50-0. But yet, while Chicago is in chaos, while the city is facing on December 31st, if they don't have a budget, the city is facing a shutdown. What does that mean? That means no garbage pickup. That means an impact on first responder services like fire and police. Things will begin to start shutting down in Chicago on January 1st. But in the midst of all of this, with crime skyrocketing, Brandon Johnson has time to go on a CNN host podcast on Saturday and refer to Donald Trump's policies as evilness. It was just a few weeks ago, and the StoneZONE reported on it, that President-elect Trump's pick as his borders are. The great Tom Homan actually made a trip to Chicago just a week and a half ago, where he spoke and basically said Chicago is going to be ground zero for deporting these migrants, specifically these violent and dangerous migrants, because that's what they are. They're violent and they're dangerous. And in communities in the south and west side of Chicago, a gang war is about to erupt amongst these new Venezuelan transnational gangs that have just arrived into our country, open door, no questions asked, and the traditional Chicago gangs who have been there for generations. And the audacity of these illegal migrant transnational gangs to put their flag in the ground and say, this city block, this is ours. This housing complex, this is ours. These apartment buildings, these are ours. And as a result, citizens and tourists, their lives are in grave danger. Because as you noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this before, but you'll notice this now. If you're driving past a prison, there's road signs that say, do not pick up hitchhikers. Why? Because you don't know their backgrounds. You don't know who they are. And that's the same thing that's happening here with this open border. Tens of millions of people have flooded into our country. It's a reason why Venezuela, and President Trump is right, Venezuela has bragged about how their crime rates are down. Well, no surprise, because they've emptied their jails and they've sent them into the United States through our southern borders. And now major cities, major sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago are struggling with a crime epidemic. This is no surprise. In other news, Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, and we're going to put up this tweet, just put out a tweet earlier this morning. Now that Trump successfully won his defamation case against ABC for calling him a rapist, when will he sue Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker for repeatedly lying and calling him the same thing? If you remember, President Trump just recently won a major case against ABC and George Stephanopoulos, where George referred to President Trump as a rapist, and President Trump has rightly won that defamation lawsuit. But what this major victory, this character assassination, this slander, this defamation, what it's doing is it's opening up the doors for these Democrat politicos who have spent the last couple of years referring to Donald Trump as a rapist. And the billionaire governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who is the wealthiest governor in Illinois, who didn't earn any of his money, he inherited it because he is an heir to the Hyatt hotel fortune. So he lands on third base and thinks he hit a triple. That's not the case at all. But Governor J.B. Pritzker, who actually told President Biden that if you make Chicago the host city for the Democratic National Convention, I will pay for the whole convention myself. That's right, to the tune of $100 million. Pritzker is so wealthy and he's so hungry for power and prestige that he's willing to pay for it. And that is why Chicago was selected as the host of the Democratic National Convention, because Pritzker said, I will pay for the convention myself to the tune of $100 million if necessary. But over the last couple of years, Pritzker has gone on Chicago television. He has given interviews to Chicago reporters repeatedly and consistently, and on his official X account, referring to President Donald Trump as a rapist. When is President Trump going to go after and sue Governor J.B. Pritzker, the billionaire who has presidential ambitions, by the way, and finally hold him accountable for the defamation and slander and the damage that he's caused, particularly here in Illinois, at a time when he had a megaphone as the host of the Democratic National Convention, and he's using that megaphone by consistently and repeatedly referring to President Trump as a rapist. It's actually a reason why, and why are we focusing so much on Illinois and in Chicago? Because it really is the ground zero, given Pritzker's personal wealth, given his outsized political ambitions, and the relationship that he's had with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and the fact that maybe in the next 4 years, he considers himself a major national player and a presidential contender. But again, the question that I have to ask for you is, when was the last time America elected a 450-pound president? He's going to make Howard Taft, who famously got stuck in a White House bathtub, he's going to make Howard Taft look like a supermodel. In other news, President Trump's nominees are still on Capitol Hill preparing for their confirmation. We know that this week, RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., is going to be meeting with a handful of U.S. senators who will be pivotal in his confirmation process. And so he's going to be spending this week laying out President Trump's vision for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services under a Secretary Robert Kennedy. But we know that President Trump has already laid the gauntlet down, and that MAGA has already risen up and made their point to any of those Republican senators who wish to derail any of President Trump's nominees, and I will say America's nominees, any of them who wish to derail these nominees will certainly get primaried, because we've seen this happen time and time again over the last several weeks. The perfect example, Senator Joni Ernst, who wasn't as receptive to Pete Hegseth's nomination and was trying to derail that nomination. And when MAGA stood up, and I've said this before, when we stand up, they stand down, her office was flooded with emails and phone calls and messages, and peacefully, not violently, and peacefully communicating that you will be primaried in your next election, and that this isn't your choice as a Washington career politician. This is the people's choice. It is why President Trump has won such a large mandate on November 5th. It is why he earned more votes than any president in the Black and brown communities. It's why, particularly in Chicago, again, ground zero for progressive, liberal, democratic policies, he flipped multiple wards that were blue, red. It's why in Illinois, President Trump lost blue Illinois by 1 million votes in 2020. He lost nearly by 400,000 votes in November. It's also why President Trump garnered more votes in 2024 than J.B. Pritzker did in 2022 during the general election when he ran for governor. The power of MAGA, the power of President Trump and his brand is so strong that it's enough to deflect and to scare any of these Republican senators who at one time may have gone in there to serve others, but after being in that environment for so long, where you're literally king of the hill, where you're working in golden and marble corridors, where you begin to drink the Kool-Aid and work with the establishment, where it's not more about what can we do to help the people, it's more of what can we do to help me elevate my status into leadership so that I can get my own motorcade, so that I can get my own security detail, so I can have my own fleet of Suburbans that drive me around, not only around Washington, D.C., but back home in my home state or back in your home district. It's not about service. It's more about serve me. And it is why the power of the MAGA voice is so strong. We're also seeing the outrageous stories, negative stories that are being leaked about Tulsi Gabbard, another hero, another wartime veteran like Pete Hegseth, who has served his country honorably. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing. She has served her country honorably. And now you've got some deep state establishment Republicans and Democrats trying to leak stories that Tulsi Gabbard is unprepared for her meetings while meeting with senators. I mean, what a ridiculous line that is, and what a slap in the face to the brave men and women who have served our country honorably. To suggest or think that Tulsi Gabbard would attend these Hill meetings totally ill-prepared is laughable and a bold-faced lie. Let's not forget that the Democrats, they loved Tulsi Gabbard when she ran for president as a Democrat during the 2019 Democratic primary election cycle. They loved her, a former revered Democratic congresswoman who served honorably, but until she destroyed Kamala Harris during the presidential debate, that's when the Democratic Party turned from her. So please stay tuned and pay attention to these confirmation meetings and hearings that are going to be taking place here in Washington. But without further ado, the man, the myth, and the legend has now joined us, Roger Stone. Roger, welcome back to your own show, The Stone Zone. How are you, my friend?
Mark, I thank you very much for jumping in here and opening the show. I think you just hit on a very key point, which is I'm not sure that the Democrats understand the extent to which these confirmation hearings for nominees like Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard are going to be a tour de force for them. The thing about Robert Kennedy, and there's a lot of talk about his being on Capitol Hill today, is that I've never seen him in an interview in which he made an assertion of any kind that he couldn't back up with a scientific evidence and an authoritative study. And Tulsi Gabbard is equally brilliant, very good on her feet. I think that they don't understand these hearings could really win the day for the nominees. It doesn't matter whether it's Kash Patel, who's particularly articulate and knowledgeable, or whether it is Tulsi Gabbard. So to the extent that you have a small band of rhinos in the Senate who think they can thwart the will of the American people in the recent election by holding up these nominees, these hearings are going to be a major advantage for the people the president has chosen.
Roger, this morning, speaking of rhinos, you put out a tweet that has gone absolutely viral about Lisa Murkowski. Tell us your thoughts behind that and why it's gone viral.
Yeah, Lisa Murkowski was appointed to the U.S. Senate by her father. So her father was the U.S. Senator. Then he ran for governor. He got elected governor. After he was elected governor, he resigned the U.S. Senate seat, creating a vacancy. Then he took the oath of office to become governor. Then he appointed his daughter to the Senate seat. That doesn't sound very democratic to me. And then she remains in office really as a product of what they call ranked choice voting, which is a voting system in which the candidate with the majority of the vote is not elected. the candidate with the majority of the vote, when you add their first and second choices, is elected. So she wasn't even elected by a majority of the people in Alaska. She doesn't, I don't believe she even lives in Alaska. A source tells me that her kids go to private schools in the Washington, D.C. area. And the president won Alaska, by almost 20 points. Now, the Republicans in Alaska tried to change the state law regarding ranked choice voting, go back to one man, one vote majority rule. The candidate with the most votes wins. And that was very narrowly defeated, I think there was a margin of 600 plus voters, although there's suspicion of widespread fraud. So it's a very corrupted system. Murkowski is whining that the voters might hold her responsible. In other words, if she votes against President Trump's nominees, all of whom I think are excellent, starting with Pete Hegseth, that they might be held accountable in primaries. And she's whining about this as if there's something wrong with that. Senators like Murkowski, like this fellow Rounds in South Dakota, I think that they need to think very long and hard about voting against the president's choices, because the voters will hold them responsible. And Rounds particularly, he's up in 2026. So his payback could be immediate from the voters. I think it's vitally important, and we've said this on the show before, Mark, that folks watching the show need to go online, find the phone number of the offices for your U.S. senator, not their Washington office, but their state offices, and their email address. And you should contact your senator. Now, keep it polite, keep it civil, but let them know in firm terms that you support, whether it's Kash Patel or Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard or Robert F. Kennedy or any of these great nominees who are committed to the agenda that the American people approved by record numbers in the recent election. That, I think, has already worked to some extent in Oklahoma, where Senator Mark Wayne Mullen made noises about potentially voting against Kash Patel, who I think is absolutely one of the most qualified nominees for the office of FBI director in the history of that troubled agency. Yet Adam Schiff, as you may have already talked about this, Adam Schiff says he's not qualified. I don't know where he gets that.
Roger, we did not talk about the Adam Schiff. I was waiting for you to bring that up because I know he's one of your favorite targets, and he's one of ours, but particularly he's one of your favorite targets.
Well, I mean, this is very clear. Adam Schiff lies as easily as he breathes. Now, he told us that he had seen more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion, but he never produced anything of the kind. Now, when he's asked about it, he says, oh, yes, we have the proof. There was a high-level Trump campaign official, and he was sharing polling information with a Russian intelligence asset. The problem with that is every bit of it is false. The individual he's talking about is Paul Manafort, who was President Trump's campaign manager in 2016. But at the time that this allegedly took place, we've now documented that the Trump campaign had no proprietary polling information, meaning they had not yet gone into the field post-convention to get those measures. So any polling information Manafort may have shared with anyone would have had to have been public information you could find on the internet. But beyond that, the man who he's alleged to have shared it with, a man named Konstantin Kalimnik, is not a Russian intelligence asset. He's a U.S. intelligence asset. The independent journalist Matt Taibbi has proven this in a brilliant analysis. But you can actually go to the cables that went from our embassy in Kiev back to the State Department when that source is referred to, but he is so sensitive that his name is initially redacted. So once again, Adam Schiff, you can always tell when he's lying because his lips are moving. And he's at it again. $30 million later, 30 million plus, this is the so-called Russian collusion that he says he's found. It's nonsensical. And now, I think we can roll this. We have a clip of him saying that Kash Patel is unqualified. Let's roll that.
Well, let me just say, with respect to some of the nominees like Kash Patel, this is someone, in my view, who is not qualified to be FBI director, and someone who claimed, for example, that he wanted to shut down FBI headquarters early in his tenure and open a museum to the deep state. So this is a conspiracy theorist.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, how about Russian collusion, the greatest conspiracy theory of them all? The single greatest dirty trick in American political history, in which the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies is utilized using what they know is falsified evidence, the Steele dossier, which the FBI is well aware was paid for and put together at the behest of Hillary Clinton, and the false claim that the Democrat National Committee has been the target of an online hack, for which there is no evidence whatsoever. When my lawyers at trial sought that proof, the government refused to give it to us and said that it was classified, but they had multiple evidences of such a hack, when in fact we now know, since the so-called CrowdStrike's memo, which allegedly held the proof of that Russian hack, was later declassified and has no such thing. And the head of CrowdStrike, who is the person looking at the servers at the DNC rather than the FBI, who admitted in the pretrial motions in my case that they never examined the DNC servers. That's a little strange. We know that man, a man named Sean Henry, who just coincidentally happened to be a deputy to Robert Mueller at the FBI, he admitted in his now public testimony before the House Intelligence Committee that he had no proof that the DNC was hacked by the Russians or, for that matter, anyone else.
Roger, we're already seeing that Democrats are now talking about protesting and not attending President Trump's inauguration on January 20th. Is this setting the stage for a repeat of his first term where all they want to do is investigate and impeach?
Well, this is why I think it is vitally important that the president not only get off to a quick start, but that he immediately do what is necessary to get this economy cooking. Because if we should lose the House in the midterm elections, and remember, we have special elections coming up in 3 districts, and we have a 3-vote margin. So our control in the House is tenuous today. If we lose the House, I think they're going to revert right back to where they were before with these fake investigations, with these false claims against the president. First, it was Russian collusion. Then it was Ukraine. We now know, in fact, their entire Ukrainian narrative was designed to cover up the crimes of Joe and Hunter Biden. They were actually the ones who were caught in the midst of misconduct in Ukraine. And then, of course, their January 6th fraudulent claims. In all honesty, Mark, I think Speaker Johnson should appoint a special investigative committee to investigate the January 6th committee, because that committee's actions are a fraud. I noticed Benny Thompson. Remember him? He's the guy who filed a civil suit against Donald Trump, accusing him of fomenting violence on January 6th, and then withdrew the suit so he could become chairman of the committee investigating that claim. He says he'd be happy to take the pardon if Joe Biden is prepared to give him one, and it appears to me like that's likely at this point.
Roger, you've been a recipient of a pardon, and rightly so, because you did nothing wrong. Your thoughts on these very bizarre pardons that Biden is issuing? You know, you've got people up in arms about embezzlement of hundreds of millions of dollars, individuals in possession of tens of thousands of images of child pornography. I mean, this really seems to be an abuse of the pardon power. I mean, is Biden even aware of these pardons that he's signing?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right about my case. We now know definitively the judge withheld exculpatory evidence that proved that I did nothing wrong. There was no motive for me to lie, because there is no Russian collusion, nor is there any WikiLeaks collaboration to lie about. Therefore, there is no motive to lie. But I was so hamstrung by the judge, who would not allow me any reasonable line of defense, then I can tell you DC is a killing field for anyone who isn't a liberal Democrat. So if you're a Republican or a conservative or just a free thinker and you go to trial in DC, and you're a friend of President Donald Trump's, well, General Flynn went through this experience, as did I. But no, I think you are here. You are absolutely right. Now, let's go back to something Biden said earlier, and then we'll bring in our guest. He said that neither he nor any member of his family had received any money from China. But we now know, based on the efforts of the House Oversight Committee, that that's a lie. So my question to you, Mark, is, does that explain why Biden has now suddenly pardoned a Chinese national who was arrested with hundreds of images of child pornography. What other logical reason could you have for pardoning such a person? There's no contrition. There's no reason for that pardon. It makes very little sense unless, of course, you were paid for it.
It sets a very dangerous precedent and is an absolute and total abuse of the pardon pen. No question about it.
The other great point that I have to make here, only because it keeps coming up on the internet, is Roger Stone and his wife evaded $2.3 million in taxes, but he wasn't penalized, and he's just allowed to pay. First of all, that's not true. My wife and I declared every single penny that we have ever made, and we accurately declared all of our meager assets. I simply ran out of money. I lost the ability to pay. I was sued in a civil suit. They did say those things in a press release, but not in their lawsuit because there is no evidence. So yes, I owe the IRS $2 million today. 75% of that is interest and penalties, while the amount of taxes from the year 2006 is less than $500,000. But the truth is, I'll be paying them every month for the rest of my life, as I have for every year since 2006. So you're not evading taxes if you're paying taxes every month on a monthly basis, 12 months a year, never even being late with the payment. So apples and oranges. By the way, when Hunter Biden's attorneys tried to make that argument to the judge in his case, he said he'd examined our case and they were, his words, like apples and oranges. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's go to our guest now. Mike Crispi has probably the hottest show on Rumble. He is also was a Trump delegate to the 2024 convention. He heads the America First Republicans in New Jersey, where, thanks to the grassroots efforts of Mike Crispi and his colleagues, we came within 5 points of winning the Garden State. No one saw that coming. And he's also a board member of the Italian American Civil Rights League, which only yesterday had their first annual Christmas celebration and their awards ceremony. Let's bring Mike Crispi in now.
Good to be with you, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Sorry we left you waiting there for a little bit, but I had to clean up a few pieces there. Mike, that was an amazing gathering yesterday. Tell us, today put on your Italian-American hat. First of all, it's very good news, which you told me recently. The Italian American Civil Rights League, which is a nonprofit organization, recently received its 501c3 tax status. That means that contributions are tax deductible. Now, this is not a political organization. Mike, tell folks what the Italian American Civil Rights League does.
Thank you, Roger. And it was an amazing night last night. And as you said right there, the big news is that we are a 501c3, which means we are a nonprofit organization where 100% of the proceeds of the donations that we receive go back towards doing things to expand Italian American advocacy within our country. You know, Italian Americans have made amazing contributions to this country since coming over in the 20th century. We gave this country art, food, culture, leadership, athletes, politicians, so many different people in so many different amazing fields. We have contributed to this great country. But unfortunately, Roger, as you know, and we've talked about several times on the air before, our values these days happen to be under attack like never before. You have people like Tim Walz, who was running for vice president not long ago, who was a longtime believer in abolishing Columbus Day back to 2011. You also have people all around the country, usually Democrat leaders, who are taking down statues to Christopher Columbus, who is a hero in the Italian American culture and in Italian American households. So we said that we need to preserve, protect, and expand our culture, our heritage, and that's exactly what the Italian American Civil Rights League does. We fight for these issues as they come up. We had an influence talking about it coming up to election time, talking about some of the things we objectively saw, but we also want to celebrate great Italian American exceptionalism. And last night, it was just such a great honor to have so many people there, Roger. You were there. It was a packed house. Hundreds of people poured in, a bigger crowd than we could have even ever expected. And we honored some amazing Italian Americans who were instrumental in the success of this country this year in 2024.
Yeah, it was an exceptional night. Mark, I wish you had been there, but of course you're Hungarian, so you would have been fully in the sway of things, but it was a great evening. This is kind of a private joke between Mark and I. It was a great evening. First of all, terrific food. The event was catered by Baby John DeLutro, who owns Cafe Palermo, which he is the king of cannolis. He's acknowledged as the absolute king of cannoli down in Little Italy, right there on Mulberry Street. And we honored a number of really extraordinary Americans, two that come to mind who I think really deserve the honor. Chris LaCivita, who was really the field general for Donald Trump's campaign for president, one of the most effective political operatives in the country, a hunter, a patriot, a decorated veteran who was a Purple Heart recipient, a true warrior, and a great man. And of course, my old friend, my oldest friends in politics, Tony Fabrizio, who is, in my mind, the single most brilliant, blunt, and thoughtful Republican strategist and pollster in the country. I can tell you firsthand, as a guy whose family was put through hell, that you learn very quickly who your real friends are and who they aren't. In politics, there are a lot of people, you've seen this, Mark, they pretend to be your friends when you have something they want or there's something you can do to help them. But when the chips are down, well, they don't return your phone calls. They don't know who you are. Not so Tony Fabrizio. And the one thing that came to mind that I spoke about at last night's ceremony was the fact that after I was pardoned, my wife was diagnosed with very aggressive stage 4 cancer. And we were broke. I mean, we lost most of our insurance, our savings, our home. We were in tough shape. And I mentioned to Tony that the doctor said, that her doctor said, or oncologist said, we needed this hospital bed for these treatments she was going to receive, but I couldn't possibly afford it. And the next thing I know, the hospital bed is being delivered to our tiny little apartment. And who sent it? Well, Tony Fabrizio. This is the kind of guy who will stick with you through thick and through thin. He's a loyal guy. He's a real man. I was really pleased to see him last night and very pleased that he came along with Chris LaCivita to accept his award.
Yes, Roger, it really was phenomenal. I mean, those two people really, I mean, were on the front lines. They tried to assassinate President Trump, literally. They tried to assassinate his character through fake news smears. We had the multiple arrests, and these two men were standing strong. You know, President Trump out there out front, but those two guys, along with Susie Wiles, really were the backbone of the campaign that helped get this thing over the finish line and lead to what I believe was the greatest political campaign results in modern history in this country. Obviously, President Trump getting over 75 million votes, really having an early night when people were worried about election fraud. We outvoted the fraud. We were too big to rig. So it's a testament to these amazing Italian-American men. And we also had amazing people there, Roger, you know, also in the cultural sense. You know, Drea DiMatteo was our Woman of the Year, Sopranos actress. We had the amazing, multi-talented Robert Davi, who accepted an award, Joe Piscopo, WABC's Frank Morano, Scott Lebedo, so many other great people who were there, Danielle Caminiti, Joanne Dariola, and our Man of the Year, Vito Fossella, the Staten Island borough president, who has stood strong in the face of left-wing Democrat policies in New York City, ravaging the city and trying to ravage Staten Island, but Vito stands strong in the gap. So it really was phenomenal, Roger, and so many people are excited about it. And Italian-American culture and Italian-Americans are going to have a say in this country for a very long time to come. And it's awesome, and it's an honor that we could bring this group to the light and represent them in this new way.
Folks, if you're interested in joining, you can go to IACRL.org, and sign up now. We have different categories of membership. Again, everybody involved here is a volunteer. We have no overhead other than the maintenance of our website and the actual events that we do. We had sponsors last night who helped pay for last night's amazing event. But you can join right now by going to IACRL.org and check it out. You can read our purposes, our mission statement, as it were, and you can sign up at different levels of participation. If you're an Italian American, this is something you need to be a part of. And even if you're not an Italian American, but you respect all cultures, you understand the important role that Italian Americans, just like Irish Americans and Mexican Americans and Hungarian Americans have played in this great country, well, you can support our work. Mike, I have to ask you, a little bit about New Jersey politics, because you made an announcement about a week ago, I guess it was, that you are seriously thinking about seeking the Republican nomination for governor of the Garden State. Now, not everybody understands that the election for governor of New Jersey is actually next year. It's in 2025. Virginia and New Jersey are the only two states that have their election in the off years. And President Trump, really, thanks to your grassroots effort, you and a hearty band of volunteers statewide, came within 5 points of tipping what was thought to be an impregnable Democrat stronghold. This tells me that the state could, if they really nominated an America First, a New Jersey First candidate, they could win the governorship. It is within our grasp. And obviously, looking at the field, based on your comments, you don't think that candidate is in the field yet. So you said you're thinking about this. Tell us what's going on.
Well, so New Jersey, Roger, was a surprise to many Americans when the results came in, but nobody in New Jersey was surprised. You know, President Trump had a rally in May in Wildwood at the Jersey Shore, and the crowd was as far back as the eye could see. I spoke at that rally. I got on stage and I said, this is the biggest crowd in New Jersey political history. And when I said that, I meant both Democrats, Republicans, any figure who's ever come to New Jersey and done a political event. That was the biggest event of all time held by President Trump. And then when we would travel around the state with the America First Republicans in New Jersey, you know, we did 35 events in almost every single county all across the state. We were in the rural areas. We were in central Jersey in the suburbs. We were in South Jersey at the shore. We were in the urban areas in Newark, okay, and Patterson. We did these events, and no matter where we went, the excitement was off the charts for America First MAGA policies to rule the day. So when President Trump almost won the state, I wasn't surprised. I said that this is the culture shift in this state, and it was all brought to us by what President Trump did to remake the Republican Party in his image. And what that means is that Republicans now are in play in New Jersey so long as we follow the America First agenda. That's what these voters are hungry for. That's why President Trump flipped Passaic County, which is vastly, predominantly Latino. It is why he made great gains in the inner cities and why Central Jersey, these purple suburban areas, went overwhelmingly for him. It is because these MAGA policies are popular. So we have a gubernatorial election coming up. The primary is just in over 6 months from today. What that means is that people are going to go and vote for their standard bearer for the Republican Party in New Jersey. We have multiple candidates running right now, but unfortunately, none of them truly espouse MAGA America First values. And to me, that's problematic. You know, up until the results a couple of weeks ago, people were saying that Trump MAGA policies couldn't win in New Jersey, that we needed to move on from Trump stuff, and it was too divisive, and we need to be squishy with the Democrats. And I always said, absolutely not. I always said that we need to stand unabashed for President Trump's policies. That obviously held true with the election results. So I've definitely been considering it because the field right now is a lot of people. None of them have been with President Trump the whole way, and they need somebody to carry the torch with these policies. I'm honored and humbled that I've gotten now thousands of people reaching out to me asking if I'll do it. I go to events, grassroots groups, people are saying it to me. And the answer is that we're seriously considering it. Obviously, I have aspirations in New Jersey politics. I ran for Congress once in the 4th district, but we're definitely not ruling this out right now, Roger. We have an exploratory committee. We're going to keep seeing what the candidates are saying as it pertains to very important primary type issues, I call them, what matters to the base. We're going to see, we're going to keep them honest, and then we're going to make a decision one way or another. But we're going to make sure that we're involved in this thing to the end and make sure we get the right candidate, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else.
You know, Mike, most people don't know this, but there's a system in place in New Jersey which the establishment uses to rig the Republican primaries called the county line. It gives a superior ballot position to the establishment candidates. Now, the courts in New Jersey have recently questioned that, and the Democrat Party, which was also propped up through their organization by this ballot positioning called the line, has, to a man, they've come out against it. I have been a long-time critic of the line. In 1981, I was able to briefly get rid of the line in the Republican gubernatorial primary. It's how we nominated Tom Kean, who then won the governorship by about 1,209 votes out of 2.2 million cast. Where do you stand on the line, and where do the other Republican candidates stand?
Well, you said it there, Roger, is that the line, it's again, it's the minutia that they want the grassroots not to pay attention to, but it is essentially the most important issue for MAGA voters in New Jersey when it comes to nominating the right candidates. It allows the party bosses, as you said, to rig the primaries. We're the only state that has it like this, where the bosses stack all the candidates they want on one corner of the ballot, and then other candidates who are challenging the establishment are placed in little spots at random on the corner and the fringes of the ballot. It gives a visual advantage to people who come in and just vote down it. So it is totally a scam, and it essentially makes any office position in New Jersey for sale. It means if you follow the instructions of the bosses and you kick up enough money, well, then they'll put you and keep you on the line. It's a scam. And guess what? MAGA candidates aren't winning from that, of course, because the party bosses are all Chris Christie acolytes who've been in there for over a decade now. So we need to undo the system. And the line right now, as you said, from that federal court ruling, it is on life support. And strong gubernatorial candidates speaking out now will be the most important factor in what the state legislature is doing right now, and that is drafting legislation to change it. It's funny, the Democrats are talking all about it because they deal with it in their primaries, but all the Republican candidates are silent. So no candidate right now has spoken against the line. Even the ones that are self-styled as MAGA candidates, they haven't spoke against it because everybody is essentially beholden to somebody. I think that the right candidate in this race, they want to prove they're not beholden to the party bosses. They're going to be the first person to come out and say, I'm against the ballot rigging. Let it be block ballots like every other state, and let the grassroots make the decision, not the insider party bosses. So it's such an important point you bring up, Roger. No candidate has said it yet. We'll see if that changes.
Well, there's one candidate, Bill Spadilla. I like Bill. He's a good guy. But I remember when he was talking about Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley should be our standard bearer. So he wasn't with the president from the beginning. And then the other issue, frankly, Mike, that troubles me is your Republican National Committee man, Bill Palatucci. He's a bag man for Chris Christie. But more importantly, the rules of the Republican National Committee specifically specify to be a member of the committee, you have to support the party's nominee for president. Yet Palatucci has not done so. So I believe under the party rules, he should be removed. What say you?
Well, 100%. And Bill Palatucci, as you astutely pointed out there, he has been the bag man for Chris Christie. He ran a super PAC called Tell It Like It Is. He also was a leader in the No Labels Party, which was this offshoot group trying to get up a candidate and get up a campaign to stop Donald Trump. Palatucci was in the middle of all that. And Palatucci is very close to, you mentioned Bill Spadilla there, a MAGA guy. But Bill Palatucci is very close to the guy who runs Bill Spadia's campaign. It's a guy named George Gilmore. Okay. And all these people, Tom Bonifanti, Bill Stepien, they all worked for a guy named Chris Christie. So you see there how it's a little bit swampy if you're not paying full attention. Now, Bill Palatucci needs to go, and we need a Republican National Committee man who's going to represent us at the RNC in a strong way. Right now, we're an embarrassment to the National Party. You know, the National Party under Laura Trump has turned over and become something great. So why should New Jersey be suffering with a National Committee man who is embarrassing us? And when we have our say in the party, we have this guy who despises President Trump and who has Trump derangement syndrome. Why should he be our guy? But unfortunately, the party bosses, okay, who control the state committee, it's called, who vote for this thing. Again, it's minutia, but these are such important things. Every state has it, and you guys should all look it up in your state if you're watching at home. But why are guys like this continuing to win? It is the broken system. So this is something that the gubernatorial candidates in the Republican primary, especially in the age of Trump, especially with Trump almost winning the state, they should be speaking out against that too. And again, Roger, crickets from all of the candidates, even the ones who call themselves MAGA.
Mark, you've mentioned this to me in the past. You say that the Illinois Republican Party, we've got about 4 minutes to go. The Illinois Republican Party has been less than supportive of President Trump, no?
No, absolutely. And when Mike's talking about this, it just mirrors what's happening in Illinois. And there's a dozen examples, but I'll give you both of you one example. Earlier this year, Illinois Review, my publication, revealed that one of the Chicago GOP chairman, who's the best friend of the state party leadership, in 2016 compared President Trump to Adolf Hitler. When we exposed that Facebook post from 2016, our Republican state leaders were silent. In fact, they didn't even want to discuss it. They didn't want to bring it up. And every time they were pressed on it, they wanted to say no comment. So they couldn't even defend President Trump from one of their own party members who was making a comparison to Adolf Hitler. It is a reason why Illinois hasn't turned red when we've got these types of Chris Christie type Republicans, people that suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, that are still in power and pulling the strings.
You know, I couldn't help but be buoyed by this decision where ABC was held liable for smearing President Trump as a rapist when he hasn't been convicted of rape. And then you pointed out to me that former Governor Rod Blagojevich pointed out that J.B. Pritzker, your governor, said multiple times on television that Trump was a rapist. I would really like to see President Trump sue him. He's a billionaire. He could afford to cough up for his smears against the president.
J.B. Pritzker spent over $400 million for his governor races, his first election and his reelection, and he's prepared to spend that much again to be reelected. And so it'd be great to put his money where his mouth is and to hold him accountable. And I hope that defamation lawsuit is as big as his waistline.
All right. We have to just about leave it there. First of all, Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review, thanks for jumping in here and getting the show started. Mike Crispi Unafraid, the hottest show on Rumble. You don't want to miss it. Mike, when can people see the show?
They can see it every single day, 10 o'clock in the morning on Rumble, rumble.com/Crispi or rumble.com/LFA TV every single day, 10 o'clock in the morning. Roger, so great to see you in the city yesterday. A historic evening. And like I always say, we're just getting started.
All right, folks, I want to remind you to follow us. You can see the Stone Zone every day on worldviewtube.com at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern. But if you don't catch it then, you can catch it later at 8 p.m. Eastern by going to rumble.com/Roger Stone. That's rumble.com/Roger Stone. Follow us there. Set yourself a notification so you never miss the show. You have 2 opportunities to see it every single weekday. That's about it for today. I want to thank again Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review, for pinch hitting for me, and also my great friend Mike Crispi for filling us in on the Italian American Civil Rights League first Christmas celebration and award ceremony yesterday. Again, catered by Baby John DeLutro. The most unbelievable meatballs, the most unbelievable cannoli you've ever had in your life. My friends, Marone, it was an unbelievable show. Thank you for joining us. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's